And we're live. Good evening, good morning, good day, good whatever it is to you. I hope it's a good thing. Welcome to another virtual DDD meeting. This time we're going to have an open dialogue about when to invest in strategic and when to invest in tactical design. And for the ones watching on YouTube, I already shared a link to Miro. And with me today from the organizers are Sophia, Maxime, and Christina. And we're going to kick it off. I'm going to share my screen. Everyone will be on Miro. Hopefully, not everyone, if you want, doesn't have to be. And we're first going to start with why are we here? So maybe Christina or Maxime, we want to kick that one off.
Please go, Christina.
My background is not so good as yours. My background last week or 2 weeks ago, I don't know anymore. It was Kandinsky with Zsofia and a lot of other people here, I hope. And 2 days we touched this question very often. What is strategic design? What is tactical design? What is DDD actually all about? And in the explanation, we always had these questions and these names, these terms: strategic design, tactical design. And this is why I think it's a great time to have this discussion and discuss what they are, what we have to focus on, and when.
Yeah, and from my end, actually, it's started on Twitter with I think Matthias Veras said something about this also, and we thought that it was maybe a good idea to start a discussion about this, and yeah, we end up maybe with the idea to make a polarity map or something to show when to go from strategic to tactical and vice versa. So that's the main idea.
Awesome, thanks. So before we can go to the polarity map, you already see my Miro board. We need to first dive into what's actually being meant with strategic design and what's actually meant with tactical design. And here we need your help. So please come to Miro, and for your understanding, just use some stickies on both of the sides. What is your perception of strategic design? What's your perception of tactical design? It can be within the domain-driven design context. It can also be outside domain-driven design context, because it's not a DDD thing, right? Tactical and strategic design. But you can use both terms. Just use some stickies. I already copy-pasted some text to give you a good clue, and it can be from everything small, right? So I'll kick it off here. So tactical design is implementation. I'm verbal today. In code. So I guess, you know, in tactical, if you don't do tactical design, you probably don't have code or anything running. So you can also use practicals or principles, right? So for me, strategic design, you can do context mapping, right? And there's not a hard boundary. So if you think, well, this can be both done in strategic and tactical, you just put it in the middle. So please. And if you want to speak up, again, feel free to speak up. So I hope people on the YouTube see what's been written on the stickies. If not, feel free to say so in chat and I'll modify it. And it's an easy one, right? The strategic patterns, the tactical patterns. And as for the people on YouTube, there's the link as well. Please feel free to join. And also, if you want to chat about anything, that's also fine by us, right? I'll keep track of the chat as well. Okay, so I see a lot of going on there on the strategic design, right? So I also see domain discovery. How do we think about that? Is domain discovery only on the strategic design part? I don't know, by the way. I don't have a clear answer to that. Because in my perception, if you read Eric, right, as soon as you do code probing, for me, that's a tactical decision you made. You also do domain discovery. So I'm not sure what other people's perception is.
Yeah, you always discover new things, whatever the steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the really interesting blog post by Rebekah Matthias, right? Where they go more into that. Okay, so what? Sorry, did someone want to say something? Code probing, for me, that's a tactical decision. Oh, I hear myself double. I think it's David. You get a feedback loop or something. Okay, so we got roadmap, planning, product vision on the left side. Do it with IT and business. Yeah. Recognize ubiquitous language being used by business. Okay. Architecture. The what? Event storming. Yeah, and I would place event storming. I'm not sure if it's all strategic. What do people think about that part? So I'm still not sure if like collaborative modeling, event storming, domain storytelling is only strategic. What do other people think?
I'm using domain storytelling in technical design too, because it's on a different level. It's a smaller view of the thing, or yeah. It does. I don't have to look on the whole picture, but I still have to look at the picture. So.
Yeah. So aggregate modeling, for instance, which is.
And domain storytelling in general, it can be in only a smaller story or something new. The first level I discussed with other teams or other strategical and tactical strategically, but after that I still have to find out how to implement it. I still need it.
Anyone else has? Yeah, go on.
Don't you want to duplicate it?
You can also put it in the middle, right? But you can also duplicate it. It's fine by me. It's not my. It's not only my board, right? It's our board. So feel free to do whatever. So anything else that people see? Why is that there and not on the right side? So anyone see anything that's, well?
If we agree that domain storytelling is on both levels, then doing it with IT and business is also at both levels.
Yeah, so maybe we should put that in the middle.
Yeah,
I'm not sure who did put it there. Maybe that person wants to speak up, because I'm interested in what they mean by that. But it's also fine not. So things like CRC cards, someone knows, right? Class, the class responsibility collaboration, or candidate, as Rebekah says it, which is more about the object model usually. Is that something you would see in tactical or something you would see in strategic? And if you're trying to talk, it can be that you're muted. So please unmute yourself. So far, I haven't heard someone. Just checking. Doesn't have to be. But, Okay. Let's see a comment here as well. Mostly tactical, but may have strategic impact. Consistency and data distribution discussion, mostly tactical, but have a strategic impact. So CQRS, ES, hexagonal. So what do you mean with that? If you want to speak up, I'm not sure if you're in this call or you're in YouTube. But I guess where you're going at, this is my assumption, is right. Some of the tactical design impacts strategy and vice versa, right? It's a balance. So I still see things putting on the board. I see people coming in. So, Cedric, you're unmuted, by the way. And I heard some background noise. Okay, so I still see people putting stuff on the board.
There's the new one on the left side called integration events.
Which one?
Integration events. You would like to challenge that?
Where is it? I don't see it.
You see me? You can follow me.
No, I don't have it on. Yeah, where is it?
Yeah, near the green one.
Ah, yeah. So who wrote that down, and maybe that person wants to explain a bit more why they put it on there.
Can you say it again? Which one is that?
Yeah, so it's next to the green one, clarify outcome and impacts. There's
oh, integration event. Okay, I see.
So is there anything on the left side? So for instance, Christina, I know you're mostly on the left side, if I may say so.
I was on the right
please,
side.
please. No, but I mean, Christina, your job mostly entails the left side, right?
Yeah.
I guess more of a strategy part. Is there anything you see that is like, what is this and why is that there? Or is this all recognizable to you?
This integration events, as I said, I would challenge it. For me, this is an implementation detail. Yeah. And of course, a discussion and collaboration, but it's more a discussion of an interface. So how we communicate with each other. The decision to have such a communication, yeah, this is architecture and this is a strategical thinking, I think. But events and integration events, I don't know. Maybe it is meant with this post-it, the decision to have such a architecture. Then I am full with it. But which events or the rest is implementation.
Sophia, how about you? Do you see anything off on the left side?
I'm just looking at it still, but not just the left to right as well, but I haven't yet.
So for me, there's one posted on the left side, recognizing ubiquitous language being used by business. So for me, the business isn't using ubiquitous language, they're using language. And for me, together we designed the ubiquitous language, right? But would ubiquitous language be more of a strategic decision or a tactical decision, design decision?
It's somehow it's I wouldn't say it's a decision. I'm not sure who wrote that. Maybe I'm not the right one who would discuss about that. But actually, I would say it's evolving, right? It can evolve even when you do strategic, and also when you do tactical.
That was me, by the way, Julie.
Hey,
the ubiquitous language, and I just meant the language that's being used ubiquitously, which becomes our ubiquitous language. That's so you can edit it again. I just changed
no
it a
problem.
little to see if that clarified it.
Yeah, so you recognize the language being used by the business ubiquitous. Yeah, I get what you're at. But the ubiquitous language itself and the bounded context is more of a tactical design decision or a strategic one. What do you think?
Well, did I turn my mute? Oh no.
No, you're still here.
If you're, following the blue book, the idea is that the ubiquitous language is. Whoa.
Yeah, I muted someone
sorry.
who has an echo on it. No.
Oh, okay. That we recognize the ubiquitous language during strategic design and the bounded context. He defines it as the bounded context is being as an implementation of the ubiquitous language. You're building the context based on the ubiquitous language. So that's just from the mind map, right? That's kind of, it's just listening for it and recognizing that those are the terms. And then in tactical, you're implementing it. That's how I've always seen it. And I kind of pulled that from, directly from like the mind map and the blue book. But, again, we don't need to religiously follow everything in the blue book.
No, I guess there's also some gray areas there, right? So,
but
so
to go for this way, it is a huge strategical decision. Deciding to build this mental glossary and understanding and wanting to understand what the words mean and follow it. I think this is a huge strategical decision.
So I put ubiquitous controlled language and then ubiquitous domain vernacular as the difference. And in my experience, you get to a certain level of organization where you actually have to start controlling the vocabulary to a certain extent from a high level. And that's part of your strategy. Whereas when you're doing like team design or other things, you might have a vernacular that kind of goes along with what the big book is talking about. So there's words that you start needing to say, this is what I mean. This is what this means to us as a company. This is what a user is. This is what a product is, and so there's a level of specificity that you need depending on where you're at when you're doing your strategic planning versus your tactical design.
Yeah.
But do you think there is a difference? So it can happen that within a team you have a different glossary or different meaning, which you don't have in a big picture?
Yeah, they may not be the same, and there may be differences between, like, if it's not part of the controlled language, right? You might have differences, but if there's a controlled language that you all need to kind of understand on, and you're trying to like aggregate data across lots of different teams, then you've got to come to some kind of like common interface that has that control among all those different teams to a certain extent. From my experience, I mean, I could be wrong if anybody has other thoughts.
So I'm not sure if it's the same. So how I see it is that the business side uses a language, which is fluid, chaotic. Someone joins in, it will be different. Of course, they will be controlled by the environment to use certain words at some point, but it's fluid. It might change or not. And that's not something, that's why we build bounded context, where we take decisions, refine that language, make it more clear inside that ubiquitous language, which is a strategic, in my perception, what Julie said, right? I placed that map on top of here, which is a strategic decision to, like, say, here in this world, small bounded context, we call it this. And then in return, probably that will return towards that business.
It's also maybe a little bit of a chicken and the egg problem, but and you need to be fluid about that, because one thing I do is, and tell people, recommend people to do is to listen for differences in how people, like maybe, like the easy division is you've got different departments, right? And different departments have their own different natural languages, right? And maybe it's not as obvious that as a department, but listening for those differences in how people express ideas might help you tease out where those bounded contexts might end up being. So like if I was understanding how Jenny was explaining it, that sounded relevant to me in terms of how I see it, because it is kind of both sides. And also, Kenny, I think you were also explaining it this way too, where, some of that is in strategic, but then in tactical, that's maybe when you really hone it and say, okay, this is like our dictionary. This is the ubiquitous language that we will be using. So there's two ubiquitous languages, right? One is like a defined one that maybe you get to in tactical, but the other is the natural one that you're listening for to try to help you tease out some of the bounded context. Anyway, that's how I perceive it. But again, this whole conversation is to help us,
Frame
evolve,
it.
right? Evolve how we see things.
Yeah. Cool. So I hope, are there any more? I see some questions popping up in the red stickies. Awesome. Because after this scoping, we're going to go to the polarity map, right? And figure out what are the trade-offs there between the two. There's one question, where is BDD to part of the design decision? So for me, BDD sits mostly, that's a good question. I need to think about that. Anyone already has a straight answer to where is BDD? So BDD for me starts with collaborative modeling, discovery. So it would be more on the left side, but divergent part.
Yeah, as I saw example mapping right above this one, maybe we need to move them. I don't know if BDD stands there. I agree with you, Kenny, maybe more on the left, because it's based on examples and storytelling, and it's domain discovery and all that stuff. So I don't know.
I was the one actually who wrote the example mapping, and I was thinking on the same actually, but at the end I ended up putting it into the tactical one, because it's there you are already basically discuss even acceptance criteria there, and how to go forward, and what are the tasks, and
that's the bridge to TDD.
Yeah, but also if you use example mapping on a higher level, and for those discussions where you don't go into that acceptance criteria level, you just discuss on a very high level what are the different examples for the very high level big picture stories.
What about observability? This could be the higher level version and not implemented, but observed on production. So the prover that things are really functioning like we wanted, and observability is on level to prove the architecture to those decisions too.
Is observability something that has to do with design?
I think you have to design it, otherwise it won't happen. It just will be a chaos.
So would that be a strategic decision to do observability?
Yeah.
And the implementation of it.
Exactly, the implementation is only implementation, and but deciding to go this way, to decide, am I happy with acceptances done somewhere not in production, or observing how the user are really acting and observing how my product works. It's a different go in a different way. It's not BDD anymore. It's really the proof if I did what I wanted, or my UX is included in this. I could have the best architecture and best strategical decisions or architectural decisions, but if my UX doesn't work, then I will see it on the left side, on the higher level. I just got the idea from this BDD discussion. Okay. BDD is for me still, we prove ourselves what we want to do, but we don't know if the user wants the same.
Yeah, and then again, part of BDD is also automation, which is clearly tactical, right? Which is, there are three parts to it.
Yeah.
So is building teams? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I have an idea that maybe we'd like to have a swim lane across the bottom of both of these, and then we can separate the goals from the tools we're using. For example, the tools being the domain storytelling, event storming, et cetera, that you've kind of stuck in the middle, and some of, and maybe that's where TD, like a swim lane for tactical might have TDD in it.
So let me create.
Does that make sense? So we can kind of separate the goals of strategic design and tactical, the things that we need to achieve, and from all these great practices that we have to help us achieve those goals.
Yeah, skills and goals and skills and tools for them.
So I'll create a few of these swim lanes.
So, it's typical DDD thinking, right? Let's break. It was getting complex. So look, I was just looking to see how I could break it down so it's easier to digest all of this.
Yes. In this other one, I'll just pull a line in between here. It's a straight line. I don't want that. So there you go. So please feel free to switch it up. So we have goals, tools, practices, maybe.
Yeah.
So then you need to know the differences between a practice and a tool. For me, things like event storming are a practice rather than a tool.
Okay.
Yeah, I tend to put them together usually because it is.
Yeah, maybe we can simplify this.
Yeah. So let's do it practice/tool.
Yeah, because sometimes people think tool, they hear the word tools and they think some piece of software that's going to get us there, which it's not. It's just a tool.
Then we have patterns.
Carpenter husband walks by who uses tools.
So let's do pattern principles.
So it's like this, domain storytelling and practices and tools. That's kind of what I was thinking. Does that make sense? Yeah. I don't want to, okay.
Yeah, for me, domain storytelling or collaborative modeling in itself is a practice. But then
and then maybe architecture patterns over.
Yeah, I have pattern and principles in the middle swim lane.
So something interesting just around the BDD stuff. What I've started doing is getting high-level constraints kind of stated in a BDD format, given then when, and saying, okay, the businesses said they want to do this. Here are the quality attributes that they want, like observability. And okay, I'll go out and figure out what that actually means. And that gives me the constraints that I can then say, given when then, for the high level, and let the teams know these are your constraints. And then they can build off of that, or come up with more specific BDD scenarios. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Nice.
But sure, this is how it starts. Was it enough? So could you explain, put every idea and every need, even if you could you every time formulate what do you expect?
As long as
experiments or yeah.
Yeah, you can't always, but you can at least say these are the constraints that we're under. Like we must, like do this in order for this to happen. We must have, we must account for these kinds of users, or we must account for this kind of login scenario, or what.
It sounds, Jenny, like even if you can't define every single one of those, there are some that bubble up and you need a place to put them.
Yeah.
And here's a place to put
your
them.
ADRs kind of feed into that too, right? Like it can feed into your ADRs, or it can
so I saw ADRs in the tactical design.
Okay, I'm going to go Google ADR.
Architecturally. Yeah, go ahead.
Architectural decision records.
Yep.
It can be lightweight, but are these purely tactical or strategic? What do you think, Jenny?
Well, I think they can be both. It depends. They're where the interesting things happen. And architecturally significant requirements are kind of different than the decision records, right? And that's where the given when thens come in.
I can't believe I've literally never heard that term before. But I'm sharing that so that anybody else who is the same won't be embarrassed.
Yeah,
I've been programming for 30 years. I've never heard that term before.
Really, this is your new ACL,
Yes. I'll be ADR.
Everything with A. But there are a lot of tools for that. How to save them in GitHub or in repositories, or where to put them. So it's
so there's an awesome video by Constantine for DDD Europe. I'll link it as well. I love that one. That's a story about him using the project. So let me hook that up.
I recommend this video as well.
Okay.
Should we put something around constraints and experiments on this map? Because I think, yes, for constraints, we know we are pretty good in constraints, in defining constraints and defining what we expect when. BDD can work good for it, but what about things we don't know what we expect? We don't want to explain exactly how to be solved or something, just experiment or have an idea.
Yeah. So
I keep turning my mic off. Nope, my mic's on this time.
Yes.
I would like to address a problem, which is the things that are hanging in the line in between strategic and tactical, because we don't have a place for them. We need to create a place for them. Right.
So you want to have a middle ground.
Maybe like a oval that goes across them. Right. It's just because I'm looking at that and I think, okay, something's not right here if we don't have a place for those. So we're just sticking those there because we don't know where else to put them.
Would this work, what I just did?
That's a good point. So here's a question. Are there practices and tools that are throughout cross-cutting? And is that what those are? Is there maybe a swim lane for just basic or an idea that these are cross-cutting? They're not just in both, but they're kind of always happening.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think the whole of collaborative modeling usually is happening in both sides. Maybe not for every practice, but they could be used on both sides. So Wortley mapping is a strategic practice, but actually you could use it on a tactical side as well. But it came from a strategic design. So
right. Another example would be continuous discovery as a practice. You would do that at the beginning for strategic discovery, but at the end, there's tactical. Just let's run a quick experiment and see which decision to make next, right? So you're discovering which one resonates with the user to solve this small problem. So that's a throughout kind of principle and practice and technique. So I don't know how we would represent those things.
So I have one in the middle now, which is called cross-cutting.
Oh,
maybe
okay.
that helps.
Okay, yeah, because
So the
this
two
is,
lines in the middle.
I was just imagining something like that, but I'm going to take that away.
So
I'm going to try to delete it. Delete.
Oh.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this whole, if you do it that, you have this visual impression that those start in the middle, so you don't do them, but really they need to start early, right? And continue throughout. So.
Yes, but in different levels. So if you take event storming, you do big picture event storming, which is clearly a strategic design thing.
Right.
But then you do aggregate modeling event storming, which is clearly more tactical.
Right. So yeah, big picture and design level event storming, you can put those two and just separate them and put them clearly in the separate buckets, right? I think we've done that. The big picture goes on one side and there's a design level clearly goes on, that's on the other side. Oops. And, you know, and then if you're into event modeling for your design level, you put that.
It's also, more tactical.
It's for most people it's tactical, and some people have this, they do it for big picture as well, but it's kind of hard to do that for a lot of people.
Okay, so do we have anything more to discuss before we can go to the polarity map? So do we have a great scope or frame now of what tactical and strategic is? Or are people still having questions about the difference between strategic design and tactical design? I will take that as a no.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks. Let's switch up to the bottom side. And I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to take you with me, which is the polarity map. So for the people who aren't, who don't know what a polarity map is, this is the polarity map. And we say in life, there are polarities and you cannot solve a polarity, you can only manage them. So an easy polarity is breathing in, breathing out. If I ask you, which one do you pick? You say, well, can't because I need them both. Right? This one is obvious, but there's a lot other things, other polarities, and usually they come with generic, right? The I versus we. So when you go to software coding, you have this thing like I need my time to start coding, but also we need to do collaborative thing, right? It's not either or, it's both and. So if you would only do ensemble programming, right, then you will get the downside of ensemble programming, which is there's no uniqueness anymore. If you only do isolation, so everyone is its own branch, let's go to the extreme, right? Then, well, you're misaligning and you're creating a lot of waste. These are polarities and you need to manage them. You need to make sure both of the sides will have a positive effect and a negative effect, right? And that in its essence is the first part I'm going to explain to you about polarity maps. So if you look at strategic and tactical design, they, again, both have positive effects and they have negative effects. For me, for instance, if you're in strategic, then strategic may sound a bit like more planning, and tactical may sound more actionable, right? But they both, that's the generic polarity I'm sensing here, but maybe correct me if I'm wrong. And both of these things have negative and positive effects. For instance, let's pick a negative effect of, and I'm gonna close this. Let's take a negative effect of strategic. Well, never get code to production, right? Easy one. So if we never do tactical, we never, and this is an extreme one, but there are also less extreme ones. So never get code to production. But on the other side, if you only do tactical, then we have a lot of waste because of misalignment. We might do things duplicate, etc., etc. So these are negative ones. We can also get two positive ones, which is, well, an easy one is alignment, and an easy one is here learning fast feedback loops, right? So now it's up to everyone here before we go, maybe any questions about what a polarity is? So we talked about what's strategic and what's tactical. So maybe now you can think of what is the positive and what's the negative of these both, because clearly we need them both, right? And they're both equally important. But to get started, to check when do we switch, when do we invest in what, we need to know the positive and negative effects of the process. So anyone have questions? Is this?
Yeah, just something. We have signals, observations, action, or heuristics.
Yeah, don't skip them now.
Yeah, that was the point. Yeah, so just focus on the center of the polarity map.
Yeah, so the center is really context independent, right?
Yep.
It's like this will always happen. So please use them in the squares, right? So go ahead. So start writing. Jimmy. And what you see is what we usually see, right? It's much easier to think of negative things than it is to positive things, as you see here as well. But that's how it is. So just to give you a few more examples, the positive side of strategy is we have less waste because we created more coordination, because it's easier, right? People generally know where they sit, why are they doing this, for what, right? It's a clear direction. That's what you get for strategic design. There's a clear direction. This is where we're going. This is where we're moving towards. And when you go to the positive effects from the tactical ones, right? There's delivery. You feel accomplishment. So I don't know if you know this feeling every time I'm sitting on energy there in a strategic session. I'm like, oh, this is amazing, but I want to code now. I really want to implement this. Maybe you recognize that, right? So sometimes you get this sitting on energy stuff. So I feel accomplishment. It's mobilizing my energy. Just talking about strategy isn't really satisfactory. Yeah, we got analysis, paralysis, analyst, paralysis. So anyone have anything they put on there? It's getting a bit small, but. So I'm just going to put it out there, Christina. Negative part of tactical is over-engineering, like building a case platform when you don't need it. So anyone has anything to add? So I see a lot of good stuff popping up here.
There is a German saying, you don't see the wood from...
Yeah, it's in Dutch as well. You don't see the forest of the trees. In English.
Exactly.
Yeah, we have that in English. We don't see the forest of the trees. I have a question for Maxime. You commented on the analysis paralysis. That was my little addition there. And you say it might be a signal / observation.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Because I know what's next.
We're going to get into that.
Okay.
I don't think it is, but if we can measure it, it will definitely be an observation. Right? But we're going to get into that. Go ahead, Julie. You wanted to say something?
No, that was it. If there's something coming, okay.
Yeah.
So is this helpful? So usually when you go in the middle, right? These are usually universal, right? Is there anything someone cannot relate to on the middle part, on these 4 blocks? Right? Usually they're universal. No? Okay. So where are we going now?
I have one.
Yeah.
Consistency.
Where is it?
Nowhere. I just thought about this because you said the middle. Consistency is needed on both sides.
Did I say that?
No. I could put it in the middle. You just explained what is in the middle. Universal stuff. So like consistency could be.
No, so I mean in these 4 blocks, that's the middle. So I'm getting into the outer side now where we're going to go. So it either fits in one of the 4 boxes. So let's move to the outside. So this is the universal part of the polarity map, right? And you can do this all sorts of polarity. I recently saw someone doing the centralized and decentralized decision, right? Which is also a polarity. You see it in the IT a lot, right? Now we need to move more to a centralized, doing stuff centralized. Now we're going to go decentralized, and then, right? This is how the polarity usually works. But if you don't manage it correctly, you see really big swings, right? All of a sudden we go to the right and we stay there too long, and then, oh, we feel the downside for too long and it starts to boil, and then we move left. But the idea of a polarity map and to manage the polarity is to stay centered. So how does that work? I'm gonna draw it a bit. So let's say you're here, right? You're reaping the benefits of the strategic part. And all of a sudden, you get here and you start sensing that you're going too far. So over at this point, you want to move towards that point. Yeah, and then at some point, this happens again. But what usually happens in organizations who don't manage this, they go down, 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 crash up, feel like this isn't working, and then crash back quickly. So that's what usually happens in organization. But we want to stay in the above of this space, as they call it. And how do we do that? It's what I said in these two things. So what are these two things? They're signals and observations. And these are really context dependent. So dependent on your context, a signal of doing too much strategic patterns is what I usually, this is a simple one, a really simple one. This is less context dependent. But if I go into a company, I'm a consultant, right? And I hear, yeah, those ivory tower architects, probably they're too long in the strategic design. Yeah. So if I hear those ivory tower architects, maybe it's time to do something more tactical with that group, right? So there's too much waiting on this. But it can also be for yourself, for your own team. Maybe something I usually see is, so this is the analysis paralysis, right? So what would be a measure there? Maybe we're spending too much time, right? What's too much time? So that's context dependent. And maybe our event storming, or for instance, refinements takes more than 1 hour or something all the time, right? There's no progress on a certain user story.
Okay,
you know?
but you cannot put this 1 hour there, because what is 1 hour? What is in, so
this is the 1 hour is context dependent, right? It depends on your team.
Yeah.
For me, it might be 1 hour. For you, it might be 2 hours. But it's measurable, right? And that's not doesn't have. I'm the one that doesn't say it has to be measurable. But it's nice if it can be measurable, because then we can say, hey, we're already doing this for so long. Maybe we need to switch. Right? And a similar goes to tactical patterns. So maybe someone has an observation or a signal that we're doing too much tactical patterns. So for me, that would be too many confusion on words being used. So if I say, well, we're discussing this same word now for 3 times while coding, maybe it's a signal we need to go back. Yeah, so too many confusions of word being used.
Another symptom of the tactical might be when people say, didn't we just implement the same feature 3 times?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So place that place it on. This is a good one. So place it on the signal observations, right? So let's start with these. What are signals observations? And what I like is to be concrete. So too many confusions in word being used. For instance, 3. I like 3 times. When I see things happening 3 times, for me, it's starting to become a pattern. Yeah. So if I see it happening 3 times,
are you looking? Basically, you're looking for negative signals, right? Not positive signals here.
Yeah.
Warning signs.
Yeah.
It's different signals. Because signals could be like positive signals too, right? Hey, this is working.
No, it's.
But we're looking for negative signals.
Yes.
Okay.
Good one, Rick. Good one. Thanks for adding that. So both sides, right? So strategic and tactical. What are some that you see? And this is really context dependent, and we might use it in your own context, right? So this is where we can help each other out. It's like, this is what I saw happening in my team or in my organization when we went too far into strategic or when we went too far in tactical, right? These are usually the context-dependent things going on. So constant refactoring, that's an interesting one, because we could actually measure or sort of measure how much time do we actually, because refactoring is something, well, that we usually do, but maybe we can say we're spending 80% of the time refactoring against maybe 40%. So maybe there's and this is what Rebekah calls an agile landing zone, right? Maybe we want to stay within the feeling of 20 to 40% refactoring of code for new stories, right? That might be a nice threshold. If we go above that 40%, okay, that's a clear signal that we need to do maybe more strategy, right? So I like that one, because you can actually sort of measure it. Not hard, but it's a feeling, right? We can ask each sprint, how much time did we spend on refactoring in your feeling? And we can start discussing that, right? And then we can make a clear decision. If that's happening, what do we actually need to start doing more?
I'm strongly opposed to this.
The constant refactoring?
Yeah, I hope everyone is constantly refactoring. The question is only.
Yeah, so how much percent? So I would add how.
Yeah, what is refactoring? Cleaning up my code, or I hope everyone is refactoring. But having, I put the other one near technical stories. So having the only goal to refactor.
Yeah,
totally agree. This is not good. It doesn't bring any value. So having goals bring value, and I refactor my code because I didn't do it earlier, because it would be premature optimization. Constant refactoring is good. Having the single goal to refactor is bad.
Could the refactoring also take into account kind of refactoring the model, or because I just added that twist in there, unless refactoring is you're thinking the same thing, unless you're literally refactoring the code, because there's that idea of well, we've figured out this aggregate, we've decided what the root is, and then it doesn't feel quite right. It's something's not right, versus getting everybody to kind of recognize when they're like, this feels good, and being able to stop going, maybe we can do even better.
I think this is why we are here. Exactly. To find out where is the moment to say, stop changing something you didn't get any feedback yet. Because everything is just this feeling, it's not good enough. When it is good enough? When can I say, okay, my model is, I think it will work, but I'm not sure, but I still say, doesn't matter, we start now. We keep it this way for at least 2 weeks or something before we go back and discuss and plan for something what we didn't get feedback.
So that might be a signal as well, right? We didn't get feedback.
This is the signal what I see why teams are in a smaller analysis paralysis, because they are unsure and they are scared to experiment and scared to make errors, to make failures.
But I think what you're saying though is actually a really good point to put on there, just like a signal, a really important red flag would be that you're not getting feedback.
Yeah,
there it is.
This is the best signal. So, if you don't deliver in something, you don't get feedback. Yeah.
Can you make it more concrete? Because not getting feedback, every second, every hour,
for
every sprint,
more than 2 weeks.
So for more than 2 weeks. So that would be the measure, right? So we wanted to make it exact, so that if you say we didn't get any feedback for 2 weeks, it's measurable. We discussed this. Now we need to take action. Right? Now we need to switch. And the
therefore mine is not. Sorry.
Yeah, which one was yours?
The too many occurrences. It was so long because I really didn't know how to express it, but it's also not concrete. So it needs work.
It needs work. So it's a good one you put it on, and now we're going to work with it with the team, right? So what does that actually mean? Too many occurrences. What is too many? Is it 2, 3, 5? I like it to be measurable. It doesn't have to be, as long as we're all clear on what too many is, right? As long as we can agree and everyone stands there in a group and you're saying, well, I think this were too many occurrences. And if the rest of the group then agrees, then it's a good signal, right? Actually, but if then someone said, yeah, no, that's not too many. Okay, then we have a problem.
Well, it's, that actually helps me realize that there isn't a number behind it. It's more about not being able to recognize when it's good enough, not trusting their instincts to just say, yeah, this is going to work. Sure, it could always be better, but this really will work. And so I don't know how to. I'll think about how to express that better. So
it can also be
measurable.
It can also be a sentence that people are saying, right? So that's measurable. So
sometimes it's easier to just give an example. Like I just wrote, for example, an example like the customers and stakeholders stop showing up to our demos. Right. That's an example of we lost. Suddenly our feedback is dropped off. Right. So that's just an example of our feedback disappearing. Hey, wait a minute. So that's a warning sign. People always complain, customers they never come to our demos. Well, maybe your demos aren't for them anymore. You're just showing them code, right? So, and then basically you're all tactical. Look at this algorithm and this feature works and look at the test pass, right? Like what customer wants to see that, right? If you're not showing them if you're not actually showing solving a customer problem, which is kind of similar to I actually put that to the one above it. The team has no way to relate what they're producing to business or customer outcomes, right? Now that's pretty fuzzy, right? So I just basically, a symptom of that would be customers stop showing up to the demo, like,
Right.
And that's measurable in a way.
It's measurable. Like the other one is, that's an idea and it's a good idea, but there's a lot of symptoms to that, right?
Wait, the green one?
So I'll just, to mine, I'll make one orange. So that orange one, team has no way to relate what they're producing to business or customer outcomes, right? And then right below it, I said, okay, what's an example of a signal or observation of that problem? And I put customers and stakeholders stop showing up to our demos. People complain about that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, when you're complaining about that, it's probably because nothing you're showing them is stuff that they personally care about, right? Which means you don't know how to relate your work to things they care about, which is a symptom of you're lost in tactical and you haven't connected to the strategy for them.
So I'm almost thinking like my green one, the representation of that is almost like people, you start seeing a lot of eye rolls in the room when people are like, well, wait a minute, maybe, maybe there's another way we can look at this. So
these are good ones, Julie, what you're going into, right? These are also social observable patterns, right? And that's also a pattern or a signal, right?
Yeah.
And so too many occurrences of challenging the model. What are they actually saying? Give me an example of how they would challenge the model.
Right.
How would they do that, Julie?
Well, they say this is good, but it could be better.
Yeah.
And that's measurable.
So yeah,
how can you measure better? You cannot measure better.
No, but they say it.
Somebody's saying that.
Yeah, it could be better. You can do another example was if just people in all your design like, type meetings or scope type meetings are just arguing back and forth about preferred implementations.
Yeah.
So that, it's kind of back and forth. It's basically, it's clearly a preference. It sounds like a preference war, right? Anytime that's happening, they're not able to connect it back to, okay, what's the outcome? Which one of these would solve our problem? Let's evaluate what solving our problem means, and then evaluate my preference and your preference against that, not just against my preference. So that's a big, long thing, but you could probably word that quickly into an example.
Well, just the idea about arguments, I think, would be just in itself is a good signal that there are arguments happening.
Yeah, but arguments, arguments over implementation details, right, is a signal that you just lost in tactical, because you should be able to bring those back up to which one's going to solve our problem, right? So if you got all those arguments over implementation details, often it's a proxy. At least one person is actually believes they're solving a different problem, right?
Yeah,
that's usually what I find is, one person's thinking that the problem's different than the other person, and the implementation detail is their proxy for that argument. If they brought it back up to how do we know the problem solved, they could get back to agreement pretty quickly, right?
Would you, when you're saying implementation details, would that be different than model design, or would those be two different? I mean, I see them as two different things, but maybe not.
I think it might just be an example of, this is a signal that they really might be misaligned on the model, right? Because it's basically arguments over model design.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I really appreciate it, because you're helping me train my brain to.
But I think it's kind
this way.
It's one of many signals. That's the key thing is, so you're maybe like, I left this too. No way to relate is a problem, right? But it's not a signal. The signal, and I left it into, because the team has no way to relate what they're producing to business customer outcomes. That's a problem. Yeah. But it's not a signal, right?
Exactly.
Signal is customers and stakeholders stop showing up to our demos. But I could probably think of 5 other signals that I would map to that problem. And that's probably, I think that's a good way of getting precise with your thinking.
Yeah, and let's jump on that one.
No feedback, right? No feedback to more than 2 weeks is again a signal of that, maybe some other things, but it's kind of.
So let's jump on that. Customer and stakeholders stop showing up to our demos, right?
Right.
Now we're getting into the upper side. So it means we need to do more strategic design. Rick, what's your heuristic? What's the first thing that you would start doing now, right? If customers and stakeholders stop showing up to our demos, what would you do?
So
what action would you take now?
What action would I take? If that was the case, obviously the team is complaining about this, right? They don't feel validated. So I say like, okay, but if you're a customer, like what are we demoing? What value from the customer's perspective are we demoing? How, right? Mm-hmm. And then just say, like, look at the concept for demo. Imagine you're a customer and not a developer. Are we demoing to ourselves or to the customer? What's the purpose of our demo? And what are we trying to get out of that? We want to engage this audience, right? So that's kind of leading them towards kind of directing them towards that, specifically through the problem. It's like, oh, customers aren't showing up if they've made that complaint. So, well, why would a customer show up? What value do they want to get out of it, right?
Yeah.
And then you can start talking about, and then you start talking about, well, okay, what business or customer outcomes do we actually have to show them, right? Say, hey, wait a minute. So if your demo is, hey, you had this problem, and here's what your life used to be like, right? And after this next thing comes out, which we haven't released it, or we have released it, so with this new thing, now here's what we believe the new experience would be like in that situation. So let's demo the before and after. Let's demo the difference, the impact we're making, right? So and that's an outcome, right?
Yeah. So what I hear you say is you're going to define the customer stakeholders outcome and make them more clear for the team.
Right. And so then I would work our back. So like, okay, let's be strategic. So where would we decide how we're going to demo that, right? And I would work back to, if let's assume we're doing things like sprints, just because a lot of people are, right? So honestly, at the end of sprint planning, if you don't know what your customer demo is going to look like, then you probably missed it, right? Like, I'm going to demo, this was the problem, and this is the outcome. I've solved this problem. And whatever tickets I have, I'm just going to bucket, here's the 5 tickets or 1 ticket. I would demo them all together as problem solved, right? I wouldn't demo ticket by ticket, look at the code changes I made, right? So really, that's kind of what I would shepherd people towards, is saying in sprint, what are the goals or outcomes? Again, I'm saying, let's assume people are doing sprints, right? By the end of sprint planning, what are the goals and outcomes? If I don't even read your tickets, the list of tickets, what are the goals and outcomes for this sprint? And we want to show those to stakeholders. And when we
what
send
are
our invitation, right?
Define goals and outcomes for the sprint. So that's an action / heuristic, right? Every time you see this happening, this is the action you take. So a bit more, because this may be confusing to some people. I'll send you what are heuristics. So I'll send it to this really quick. A heuristic is a plausible aid or direction in the solution of a problem, right? You have a problem now. You signaled it in your context. This is the action you take, Rick, right? And maybe others could do that as well.
Right, and I would put, that's the way you word it is great, but I would put demonstratable. It's like not necessarily measurable, but at least demonstratable. So I want to say, hey, I can show you this being achieved, right? I can show you the results. Right? If you can define those, not just, hey, we're gonna,
So here
code,
in the top left, you see. So I'm gonna take everyone here. In the top left, you now see define goals and outcomes for the sprints, right?
Right.
So maybe you can add more to it. But this is.
I would just put because the word measurable is fun, but I would demonstratable.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, goals. And maybe. Right.
Yeah. So let's get back. So this is examples.
Define goals as demonstratable outcomes for the sprint, right? So I don't know if that's a word, demonstratable. I spell it right. But anyways, so I would define my goals not as I'm going to implement these 5 tickets, right? But I would define my goals as demonstratable outcomes. So that's probably a clearer way to word that. Because a lot of people put sprint goals, but it's basically, I'm going to release this feature. I don't care. That's output. I'm going to this feature. I believe this feature is going to solve this problem. So that's the goal I want to say, hey, this problem will be solved. Let me show it. Right?
Yes. So let's take it back to Julie, to your example. Did you map that already out, Julie? If she's still here, I'm not sure. You're on mute if you try to talk. And also she switch it to a strategic signal. So who on the left side?
Sorry, I had my mic off and my sister had texted me, so I was a little distracted.
No problem. So let's take one of your signals observations, Julie, that you were just talking about, and let's see what heuristic would you use in order to, well, what action would you take when you see this signal?
Okay, so arguments over implementation details, which is, what Rick helped me evolve to. And it's not as clean cut as the heuristic. Let me just start by saying what I do. Mm-hmm. Right, that's my heuristic. What I do is I stop everybody, right? And I point out what I think is happening, which is that we need to trust your instincts and use your instincts to feel like things are good enough. They will never be perfect, right? And so it's also a matter of, I have to understand what those arguments are, right? What they're arguing about. So these arguments are because people just can't leave it alone, right? I think it's good enough, and it probably is good enough, but they're having some people on the team are having a hard time realizing that and trusting that that's okay. So I'm feeding this to you, so maybe you can help me come up with something succinct.
And is that something they need to then reiterate on in strategic design? So what are they doing this for? What is our strategy? Do you then go through that?
That's smart, right?
This is where I start wordly mapping, by the way.
Well, if we have some kind of reference point, that's an interesting action. So I haven't, but the idea of having some kind of, maybe you had already done, so let's say we'd already done wordly mapping. So go back to something that we can reference and saying, okay, what we have here, how does it achieve what we defined over here, right? Is it achieving it, and is it okay to just say, yeah, this is good enough and move on? So maybe that's, wordly mapping is a really interesting.
Wordly mapping is a good example, but it really depends on the context of that design decision. So what I kind of my preference, and also what I hear kind of behind what everyone's saying, and whether I hear correctly, is really just get people to step back and agree on the problem they're solving and how they would evaluate that problem has been successfully solved. That would be my action heuristic. Let's make sure we're on side with that. What's the problem we're solving, and how would we measure, or how would we evaluate whether that problem has been successfully solved in the future? And one way I would do that is, for some people, that's hard for them to say, you guys, you're talking about this option. I want you to imagine that in this envelope here, there is a clearly defined third option. You don't get to read it. You're only going to be able to evaluate its success when we're done. And so, how do you control
forgot
that?
To mention that Carol Merrill is holding up that envelope. You have to, So basically, young people might not understand.
So that's one way, because people kind of, that seems like, but basically, ultimately, you can't control everything. So let's step back, control the outcome. How will we measure? How will we know we're right? And then now let's look at those two decisions after we figure that out against my magic decision and say, okay, which one of those do we believe would best meet those criteria? And usually you never have to come to that thing because they realize they're talking about a different problem. And then they come to it on their own. That's kind of my intervention.
I would add one thing. These ADRs, every decision you make as a group, write it down together. Because otherwise you come back to this decision and put it in and question it all the time. If it's not written and not written in front of everybody, then it will be interpreted. So mark these decisions, reach somehow these decisions by not vetoing or not asking what is good enough, or what Rick said. I think it's a really cool idea. I would go the same way, and write it on somewhere where everybody agrees, so that you don't come back and have the same discussions again and again.
But even that is a signal as well, Christina.
Of course.
Signal that probably you're not aligned, so you need to do more of. So this is a signal, right? If we come back on decisions, or we're getting confusion. That's the thing. Did you put it on?
This was the discussion.
Arguments over implementing.
Exactly.
Yeah, cool.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Julie.
I'm also thinking that, at least for me, maybe part of my process going through DD D with teams, I do need to have, as an earlier part of the process, make sure that something does exist that we can lean on, something like a Wardley map. But that should be part of the process, not me doing it as a, oh no, I got a problem now, I better go do a Wardley map, or some kind of a map. But in prefacing, like anticipating, that problem is always going to happen. So having something that in the process that happens early on, so that when you get to implementation and that lower level modeling, that you always have a reference point to go back to see, have we achieved it yet? Have we achieved it? Instead of just relying on your gut feeling like, oh yeah, this feels good.
So
yeah, go ahead, Jenny.
Something we've been doing is building out service agreements, and those state like the high level objectives. And then a lot of times we'll, within that, kind of define the quality attributes, and that will help us build out a dashboard that measures the success of whatever the objective is. And that, like, you don't even necessarily start event modeling until after that, or you don't, but the events are going to feed into those dashboards, and you kind of get there with the Wardley map, and you come all together with the Wardley map. And that's kind of how I've done it a few times now, and it's worked okay. I mean, I
want to come work with you on a project.
So these are all great examples. Like you see, like I put the general pattern that I follow, which is I use the magic words. Start the conversation with, I see people arguing over implementation details, and I use the magic, I start my sentence with the magic phrase, let's take a step back. And then basically, and I ask them, okay, let's review the problem we're solving and agree on how we'll evaluate that the problem's been sufficiently solved. That's kind of but people get good at the triggering when they get into the debate later on, the shortcut is, hey, let's take a step back, and they know that what's coming. And then you could say, okay, in this case, a Wardley map is the way to review that. In this case, those service agreements are a way to do it. So you can sort of use all of those tools, but really the pattern is take a step back, review the problem, agree on how we'll evaluate or measure that it's been successfully solved. The moment we can come to that agreement, the detailed design discussions become very anchored. And usually people can run with them.
So now what part of what Matthias was saying in his Twitter rant, right, was people having the meaning of strategic design is more important than tactical design. So we took we showed that here, right? Oh, if you don't do tactical, we need to do more strategy. But let's dive into a signal observation when you're doing too much strategy. So when do we know we're doing too much of Wardley mapping, or we're doing too much of the stepping back, right? What are anyone has a signals observation we can dive into and do the same thing? What is our heuristic to do here? So who wants to speak up? So let's do the other way around to end this.
If it's taking more than a week.
If what, the mapping or the strategy?
If the process of strategic planning is taking more than a week before you get to an experiment, that's my heuristic.
Yeah, there's the stakeholders are complaining they aren't seeing results. That's one. Your analysis paralysis.
Yeah. So how can we measure analysis paralysis?
Or
so it's what you said, right? Taking more than a week, for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Planning.
Yeah. Or another signal is people actually, a good signal is people ask not to come to the planning meeting because they want to get work done. That's a pretty direct signal, right? And then you're like, okay, why, right? So they ask to not attend the planning meetings so they can get work done. That's
That's a tough one, because sometimes an organization needs strategic design and they still said, yeah, I have so many works to do.
Right.
So maybe that's even a signal of tactical design.
It's
too much tactical design.
Right. So you have to
so much waste creates so much more work to do, etc., etc.
Yeah, that is a tough one, because it's not a direct signal, which you have to do some root cause analysis to figure out why. And some people just want to code and they want to do all tactical, right? Like you say.
Yeah, so, which creates more waste, which create more hero rockstar developers, which will create even more work for them because they're not aligned. There's no priority setting. If we do proper strategy planning, we probably don't have too much work to do. That would be my outcome, preferably, right? We will be happy every day because we're not doing too much waste. So that's any more, but it's a good point.
Yeah,
so people fall asleep in meetings. It's a good one. People sit on their phones. That's also maybe that's also cause for a break, by the way, just so you know.
Yeah, I think all of these things you have to kind of look at the context and root cause a little bit.
Stakeholders drop out of design or planning meetings.
Yeah, like if you say planning and analysis is taking more than a week, if you're starting a brand new initiative that no one knows anything about, and it's all about what's the problem, it's all about problem discovery, that might be okay, right? If you're talking about planning a sprint or the next 3 sprints, that might be it's like, okay, that's a little too much, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But if you're starting from scratch, right?
Starting from scratch
before you can get to if it's starting from scratch before you can get to an experiment,
So all of these things have context, and that's kind of, as long as we realize that, you can just imagine which context that's most painful and then say what you're,
So I had this meetings where no strategic decision was being made in a week, right? I had that.
That's a good one.
So what I did was actually, my action there was what probes, so experiments, can we do on the, options, right? So take 2 options and, code them out, right? So I had 2 people, 2 pairs using 2 different technologies, coding it out, or 2 different models. I don't care if it's models, if it's technology, but there was 2 pairs for 2 days, go. Experiment on it, reflect back, and you create it for the same problem or for the same technology, the same model or a different model. So take 2 options and code them out, code probe them out, right? That's usually my action or heuristic. If we cannot make a decision in these 2 hours, probably we need more information. Let's just start to code.
Yeah, and I'll give you, there's a tool related to that, which is the opportunity. I don't know if people are familiar with the opportunity solution tree.
No, please.
So that's a good tool for continuous discovery. So I'll just put that one. If you're in a continuous, you can just look at it. If you can, spell solution. So that is a tool that allows you to say, okay, here's the problem. What are the opportunities to solve that problem? And you can investigate multiple options and then come down with, it's really a pattern for doing that. And it's a continuous discovery tool, right?
Yeah.
So which is kind of really that example you came up with is exactly what are 2 options, let's do them out, right? But basically gets people to list the options and then say what experiments could we run against each of those options, right? That's really
so our situation was about a headless CMS, right? They couldn't take a decision, or about using a team in React, right? There was either Tailwind or Team UI. Okay, let's try them out both for a week and see how you feel. It's only when you do it know if it's going to work. So give 2 examples of them both and see how it went. Right. Any other signals or observations when we're doing too much?
Actually, Kenny, I can really relate to your point before. You mentioned that take 2 options and code it out. It's perfect. But I'm just thinking about like there are people who can code it out, but how will they know about that they need to do a proof of concept or whatever? So the communication gap between those. So the strategic meetings where the decisions cannot proceed because there are no options coded out. So how will those problems or those needs fall through the to the people who can code it out? I'm just thinking about that.
So in my case, to give a bit more concept, this was between 2 teams, right? And we had
I see.
We had I was facilitating the architectural meeting between the teams. I wasn't making the decision. I was facilitating the decision. So the 2 teams or whoever wanted to be there from the teams couldn't make that strategic decision. I know we need to make this, else progress will stop. User feedback will stop because we couldn't afford that. So I just told them we need to make a decision. 2 teams, work it out, come back in a week, and then let's take the decision.
Okay, I see.
Okay, can you give more example about your?
Yeah, situation? I mean, I'm just thinking about it when there is a, I don't know, strategic meeting or problem space or whatever, where there would need to be a decision, but no one knows about people who are struggling. I mean, no one knows about that there is a struggle around the decision. I mean, no one who could code it out or come up with options and these kind of things. So like, how will, like, if people who are on, for instance, on the strategic meeting and they are struggling with deciding something, maybe they don't think about going there to people who can actually help, because they can maybe do proof of concept on that or whatever. So they don't think about asking for help from the tactical side, let's say.
Yeah. So that's more about, I think that was more the middle part, right? Having more collaboration between strategies and people who are more on a tactical level have these, at least there, someone who knows, look, that or team A or team B. So a tactical lead or a proper architect, right? A proper architect for me is someone who sits in between the teams.
Yeah.
Note what, in the tower. No, in between the teams, in between the 2 towers. No, but knows, for me, that's usually my role. I'm sitting in this meeting and saying, team A or team B can do this.
Okay.
Let's plan this out, right? Let's put this on the backlog and let's have the communication in that place.
Okay.
Maybe we can generalize it somehow and saying it, ask for help. So
actually
ask other, recognize or accept that you don't succeed, to finish it, to accept in an acceptable time. And this is my heuristic. I always have deadlines and owners until then to make this decision, or have a meeting or agenda with the goal and the scope. So, and if we didn't succeed, then it's the next point. Okay, we need help.
Yeah, in my opinion, I mean, in my experiences, it very rarely happens. I mean, that people, go and reach out for help from the strategic room to somewhere else, because
they should.
They should, because, definitely.
I think the example of this is not really a strategy. You could put it as a technical decision if I use Tailwind or I don't know what. Of course, it takes a lot of time to change this decision, sure, but it impacts only a small part of a product delivery team or company.
Yeah.
Bigger decisions should be, of course, feedbacked and challenged, and this is already a help. If I play my idea to other people and ask for feedback.
Yeah.
Getting help.
So one thing I just noted, I added, because it depends, again, it depends on the context of the decision. So we're talking about in the first example, we're talking about a solution level decision, right? Which is basically, and the great thing is to take a couple options, code them out, try them out, do an experiment, right? So that's where the opportunity solution tree is a tool that you can use, which basically scaffolds you the, what are the options? Which ones are we interested in running experiments on, run them in parallel, and then revisit until we narrow it down, right? So that's a pattern for that continuous thing. But if it's a strategic priorities decision, which happens a lot, right? Another tool I might use would be assumption mapping, which allows the people to get on the same page, and instead of saying, well, I got all these things to do, what should we work on? Say, what's our riskiest assumption or unknown for our business as a whole or for our customers, right? And then what experiment can we run to de-risk that? And it's like, hey, and suddenly when they do that, they need some learning, and then they can make a strategic decision based on that, or decide now what's the new riskiest assumption, right? So they can kind of narrow down on reducing risk and increasing the odds of success. And that helps people make safe decisions when it's strategically fuzzy. So again, it really depends on the level that discussion's happening, but those are two drastically different examples, which kind of have different patterns for getting people to take action, right?
Yep. Cool. So we're nearing our end of our conversations. I hope people got a bit more feeling about what's strategic design, what's tactical design. And I hope people get a tool, at least to get these discussions out in their team, right? Because that's the whole reason. It's really context dependent, as everyone was saying, right? Everyone has their own set of signals and observations during this. But we already knew we need them both. The question is, when do we switch from one to the right? And that's really a context dependent one. But I hope you got some signals for yourself to look at in your own team, in your own organization. Get some of these signals and observation that we shared today. The board will be freely available, by the way. And hopefully you already got your actions, heuristics out. So how do we actually switch? What are some heuristics we can think? So please keep sharing these, by the way. Hopefully we will create a platform where we can share this together. But I hope this polarity mapping will give you the modeling power to do this. So any questions or any other comments? And I'll stop my share for now. Does anyone else have any comments, questions, other heuristics they want to share before we close off?
I really like this format you facilitated here, Kenny. I mean, apart from the topic itself, so how we mapped it out, that was great. Thanks for that.
It's a really nice, and I've been doing this with Evelyn and Hien, and we really enjoyed this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure, and at some point, you're right, we're making it clear now, by the way, so we're making it explicit, but at some point, like, everyone already has this heuristic. So sometimes you already do these things, making them explicit with your team, creating a shared idea of it. That's really important, so that you don't get into the discussion like, no, this is not really a signal. No, I see it different. No, make it make it explicit, right? What is the signal? And what are we actually going to do? So that we don't have the discussion about the signal and about the action. Making that explicit is so important. And at some point, when you do this a lot, you don't need the explicitness anymore because people live by it, right? It's getting a part of the culture that oh, how we do it here. If we do this 3 times, then we're going to do this, right? So if we argument over that implementation detail here for 3 times, then we're going to go back to that Wortley mapping, right? And then it gets part and ingrained in your culture. But first, you need to make it explicit.
That was great.
It.
Just a little bit messy.
But
if you look at the board,
that's good about that, right? I just tweeted
design is messy. Design
Life is messy.
Yeah.
Life is messy. Design is messy. Yeah. Yeah. That's from here. You want to make it more clear, right? Formalize it.
You know, I am a finisher, and this feels like starting.
Well, then Christina.
No.
You have,
I need more.
I'll leave it open for you.
Yeah, I need more experience. More. We have to repeat this a few times, and then I will surely have an idea. Or at least I will accept that that's it.
Well, I think for this, if you wanted to use this, make it practical going forward, like other than a discussion like this where you're doing idea storming, is to pick your one signal and then flow that through and say, that's my pattern for that signal. So you don't have to do the whole thing, like, or these two complementary signals, and say, that's my strategy. Formalize it for yourself. I think that's how I would make this more personally useful. And that's kind of where I have this patterns for solution level decisions and strategic decisions, assumption mapping, right? If they're struggling on strategic priorities, usually there's so many assumptions in their heads and they're dangerous and risky and like, I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of this. So assumption mapping brings that forward, right? That's a pattern of, and if it's more solution level, design level, it's really often they're just fighting on, this versus that kind of topic, which is instead of saying, what are our options? So you want to step them back to, what are our options to solve that problem? And that makes them step back to, okay, well, what does solving the problem mean, right? So those are patterns that I use, but I've kind of formalized. But it's really about when they're struggling to make any decision and move forward, you can kind of figure in that context, what's the decision they're struggling on and what's my good pattern for that one. So.
Yes, exactly. And that's it, right? We've been doing this now with people who aren't in a team or in the same context. So the signals and observations are different. So do it in your own team, formalize it, and run through one and start with that and start seeing it in your own team or your own organization. And at some point, the middle one is really to get two people who are polarized or two groups that are polarized, right? Together on one page, because usually people only see one part of it and don't discuss both parts. So that's why there's a middle one. But since we're not in the same team, the middle one is easy, right? But if I can bet you, if you're in a team and you're doing the middle one and there's conflict, people usually see it, only see the negatives of one and the positives of the other. So if there's huge conflict, the middle one will really help you solve and step in each other's shoes. And then you can start talking about signals and heuristics. Okay,
yep.
Then
great.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for, collaborative modeling this together with us. I really enjoyed it today. I learned a lot. Thanks. And within a few weeks, we have Trond coming here talking about open system. What was it again? Sorry, I forgot.
He talks about everything what's not on the paper here.
Yeah.
But
between the lines.
I'm looking it up now because I forgot. But
social
it was
right?
open social technical systems. How can I forget? Sorry for that. So hopefully see you 23rd of November. There was a hiccup on the website. Should be fixed. Hope to see you then. And thank you everyone for this. And you can check it back on YouTube if you missed most of it. So thanks and see you